Hey, we're still on the client acquisition module, and this is still Lunch and Learn. And a lot of this Lunch and Learn gets pretty technical, but everybody's asking me, what can I talk about? What subjects should I use? And so I'm giving them to you now, but I'm going pretty deep because I'm used to coaching, and once we get into product or an idea, then I'll help with that as far as I can. So when we're talking about this stuff, you probably won't have time to go this deep into it at a Lunch and Learn, but labs that I've talked to pick up a lot along the way. So, you know, if there's one little pearl somewhere that you learn, or something you can learn to do different or save some time, then, you know, implement it in your lab. That's what it's here for. And I want to help you all I can in that way too. Now, I'm not telling you you're going to learn anything here, but this is a great Lunch and Learn subject, and it's on material selection. And everybody asks about it now, and you know, it's easy for me to go back a lot of years, but just going back 10 years, the big thing was, hey, is this new zirconia gonna be okay? How much testing is out on it? Back 15 years, we didn't even know things existed like zirconia. You know, I heard it was coming down the pipeline, and as far as milling a crown, that was ridiculous. And everything's changed. So instead of everything being a PFM or a gold crown, now those are old news. And now everybody wants to know, what's next? What's the next cool thing? How much further is dentistry going to go? This is amazing. Well, it's changed more in the last 5 years than it has in the previous 35 for me. So things are changing fast now, and they will continue. So on a Lunch and Learn, people are hungry to know about materials. What's out there? What are you using now? What's successful? What is everybody else using? So let's tell them. Here's the deal. Not long ago, of course, it was all PFM and gold crowns. Now, and it's kind of sad, this is weird. It's a weird take on the way dentistry is going, but we're making our decisions on what's cheap, and we're making our decisions on what is cosmetic. So we can say, you know, what will make me look good but be as cheap as I can get it. Wow, that's what's driving dentistry, and that's what we're in business to produce. So this is another subject, but we need to look at what we're doing here. Okay, the cheap thing and the cosmetic thing, the white thing, is zirconia. And so zirconia a few years ago is different than zirconia today. But zirconia, the way it got its reputation as Bruxer, as being monolithic and strong, zirconia, that original zirconia was 1200 megapascals, sometimes even more. A megapascal is how strong it is, how resistant to fracture, crushable. A megapascal takes in a few different things, but mostly that's how we measure how strong things are. So we're about 1200 megapascals with a solid zirconia crown. That's way, way more than we need. It's more than the doctor wants to grind off. It's more than he wants to cut into for a root canal. It's ridiculous strength, but it's not ridiculous fracture strength. what zirconia started out saying was, hey, use this instead of gold. Do not use this instead of gold. They're saying zirconia can go super thin and still be really strong. That is not true. And it's really not true with today's zirconia. Today's translucent zirconia is a lot less strong and still subject to fracture, and so there's certain guidelines we need to use to make sure that we're using zirconia the correct way. So zirconia needs a minimum thickness, and it used to be 2-3/10. That's what the big guys were recommending, and of course that's ridiculous. Zirconia needs to be 8/10 minimum, and the last seminar, the last things that I got shown, which was a big meeting less than a month ago, was zirconia should be closer to 1 millimeter thick at its thinnest point. So we're learning a little about this and the longevity, and that is zirconia needs to be thick in order to be strong. Now, there was a place back here that we talked about implant abutments, and I didn't even talk about zirconia implant abutments, and that's because we shouldn't be doing them. When they're super thin at the interface, when they're thin, they're going into a thin area, supporting as an abutment, supporting a tooth. Thin zirconia fractures. So let's keep that in mind when we're picking an abutment or a crown. Let's not get into that zone. So we need to be a millimeter or close to a millimeter thick. Now that brings on a whole bunch more questions, because we're going to be retraining doctors and a lunch and learn, even this office. We're going to retrain their thinking a little bit with zirconia. So zirconia, regular zirconia, solid monolithic, looks like chalk, and when we started out it was because it was this great new material, but it didn't look good. So then we started trying to layer it and maybe put a layering porcelain all the way around, and that started fracturing off. Now this is years ago. So now what? Zirconia was getting a bad name, so now what do? So we just got layering the facial that was not coming into occlusal contact, and that was much more successful, especially on upper anteriors. Layering the facial got to be all right. It wasn't great because you still had that substructure that was chalky, but we were getting better with zirconia. When we got into Emax, Emax has about 3 to 350, maybe 400 megapascals. That's plenty strong for a tooth. It's even better if it's bonded in, because it picks up the strength of the tooth underneath. So Emax is plenty strong for full mouth rehab even. Emax is great for that. And it's beautiful. But zirconia is coming on like a freight train. Everybody wants zirconia because it's strong. And now we have translucent zirconia. It's about 700 megapascals, so it's stronger than Emax, and monolithic, it looks great. If you're going to layer it, you have to have a reason to layer it, because it already looks good. It's translucent. Trans zirconia is great, but now we're going to layer it only because it needs maybe some mamelons, maybe translucent halo, maybe translucent overlays to match a custom shade. if you're doing those kinds of things, then layering is still called for and is still useful. So we're just gonna write a couple of things here. This is regular zirconia, the old stuff, and it's 1200 megapascals. This is translucent zirconia, and it is 700. This is Emax, and it is 350. There's two ways to do Emax, and that is wax it, burn it out, press it, and they say that that is stronger. Okay. Or you can mill a blue block of Emax and sinter that, and then stain it, layer it, whatever. And they say that might be 50 megapascals less strength than pressing. In a lab situation, in a lab the size, I'm running about a 14-man lab. In a lab the size of mine, we have almost stopped pressing Emax. It doesn't fit with our workflow now. What's happening? Everything used to be invest it, burn it out, cast it, or press it. Now it's scan it, design it, mill. And that's the workflow that's happening, and it's going to happen more and more. That's just what happened to the whole dental industry. We've gone CAD/CAM. So Emax, we know, is going to stay here around 350. You can bond zirconia now, and it's more of a technique than a product. So there's a technique to bond zirconia where in all the years up till a couple of years ago, you could not bond in zirconia. You can now. You've always been able to bond Emax, and that has always made it a little bit superior, because as it takes on the strength of the tooth underneath, it makes Emax strong, and it's already beautiful. So if you layer Emax, it is even more beautiful. The only reason you would do that is to match a custom shade, really, or if you're doing a super custom case and want those layering effects. So these are the main things, and let's talk about if you're doing this you're doing a lunch and learn. Can you do a bridge with this? Yes, you can. Can you do a bridge with this? Yes, but. So let's talk about yes, you can first. A 3 or 4 unit bridge with Emax or with zirconia is okay, but in the interproximals, you've got to have some room. You've got to have, remember, we went back to zirconia has to be thick to be strong. So you've got a prep and a prep, and you've got all this room in between to make your crowns. And all of that, with those two splitted together, gives you tons of room. If we're going to open this up and say we have to have a Pontic, and so let's do a prep and a prep, and let's just say the opposing is coming down here and it's doing this. This opposing is not giving us room to get thick enough for our zirconia thickness. So we're we're making our crown, and we're thin, and we haven't got any connector here. So we make this little pondic here with not enough connection room. The patient bites down on that, and they just knock that pondic right out because there's not enough connector. Not because there wasn't room in the interproximal where the preps were, it's because of the opposing. And when that opposing encroaches on the preps or your bridge, you're going to lose your room there. And if we cannot adjust that opposing enough or re-prep the case for a zirconia bridge, and we can see that there's not enough room in there in those interproximals, that calls for, are you ready for this? Back to the tried and true PFM. Because a PFM is strong in those interproximals because we can take the metal down out of the way and still have a really strong connection. So, contraindicated depending on the room for a bridge. Emax should only bridge in the anterior in someone who is not a bruxer. I'm a bruxer. I believe I would break an Emax bridge wherever it was, anterior or not. Emax really should not be used on a posterior bridge unless this is a little old lady and it's opposing a denture and you're not going to get any pressure there. Then it's beautiful, it'll probably be fine. But think about where you're using these products, and that's your lab will have its own take on some of this, but this information I'm giving you is up to date as of right now. So a PFM still does have its uses, and a lot of the guys, old timers and people who have done PFM their whole life just can't switch away from it. In my lab, about 10% of my work is PFMs, and the rest of it is zirconia and Emax. So there are some products coming along to watch for, and these guys are making a move to get into mainstream dentistry, and I won't name names, but these are high performance polymers, and they mill, they're super strong, a touch flexible, and we're making full arch implant prosthesis with these. The all-on-4, the teeth in a day, we're making them out of these high-performance polymers now. And there's more coming down the line, so this is the stuff to watch for that I see coming. Another thing to talk about when you get into a lunch and learn with this is just minimal preps. What I mean is minimal room. We need 1.2 prepped clearance on a zirconia or an Emax crown, and 1.2 gives us a little bit of it, gives us a tenth for die spacer. So the virtual die spacer that we put in there, and then we want a little bit of room for clearance, and we need our restoration to be at least 8/10 to a full millimeter thick. And this is a really good time to tell your office that you're presenting this to what those needs are. So when we were talking about before, and you equilibrate that model, and then you take a picture and send back and say, I need just a little bit more room here. Where do you want me to take it from, the opposing or the prep? Then they'll know more where you're coming from there. So this is, in a nutshell, material selection.